Hey guys, this is Tyler here in Estonia, and I'm going to talk with everyone about why they need to follow their own plan. They should not diverge and follow anyone else's path in life. Now, I've spoken on many topics here across the spectrum. I've obviously spoken on many countries and many job situations. Many guys have completely different situations in life. Age range obviously makes a huge difference among many other factors. And one of the most important points or lessons is that you got to stick with what works for you. Each person has a different plan, a different personalized approach they should take regarding their path in life. And whether that's personal, career, whatever it may be, you got to stick to your own plan. Don't divert and get off and just simply follow someone else's plan. Or if it's a plan that, say, your parents have designated for you, maybe it was what they wanted to do and it's not actually what you want to do. And you really have to be honest with yourself. Also realize, though, that people have different situations. They have different opportunities. You cross paths with different kinds of people. And what works for one guy may not work for another guy. And this is really critical because maybe in previous videos, people may get the impression that I'm giving like orders to do this, do that. No, I mean, at the end of the day, each guy has a really different situation. Each gal has different situation, and that has to be taken into consideration. You may be in a situation where you have to save some money. It entails you living for another 5 more years in your home country before you can leave. Other guys, especially who are sitting on a good deal of wealth, could leave at a moment's notice, and that guy is remaining. If that's what he or she wants to do, that's up to them, honestly. I mean, but that's not to say that guy does have to remember that in their situation, they have the money, they have the monetary resources to leave if they can, and sometimes it's better to do things sooner than later. And also, people obviously have different talents and different expertise, specifications that they're strong with. Not everyone can do the same thing, and it's just also a situation where maybe going somewhere else, it's not possible. It's not practical for a guy because the type of work they do means they have to remain in that country or economy. And honestly, if someone is doing really well in their home country, they shouldn't leave. They're just leaving because someone else is leaving, or it's more based on emotions. It's probably not a good deal. But if you're like, say, in a really bad rut, you are like unemployed, maybe you're a younger guy that knows that you have desires down the road and it may seem more practical to do sooner than later. In that situation, leaving could be the best thing out there. This could also apply to starting a particular type of business, opening certain kinds of bank accounts. And I'll go to the analogy with the stock market. We obviously saw the massive GameStop move. This stock went from a few dollars a share, all the way up to over 500 at its high point. Now it's around 300 range. And there were certain guys, they had very strong convictions and they held on to the stock. I've spoken before, like the CEO, he didn't know, probably he was on a gold mine at the beginning of last year. I think he has roughly 2 to 2.2 million shares of the stock, which at one point, I think he was worth over $1 billion. And considering that this would have just been like in the low millions earlier last year, it really shows the fact that just like for these other investors, there are many guys similar to with Bitcoin that were sitting on what maybe at the time was like $30,000 worth that are now multimillionaires because they held it, they had conviction. And yeah, there were a lot of other stocks moving around them, but they just held on to that stock. And when the time came, it came. And for those guys, it was the best thing to sit on GameStop. Even if everyone else was chasing Tesla or chasing all these other stocks, that was the best thing for them. And it eventually worked out. And that's something you can utilize this example that your breakthroughs will happen. It probably won't be when it happens for other people, and it may not be in the same areas, But when it does happen, it'll be for you. And that's the main point here. Just like these guys in GameStop, they were patient, and it just happened to be the stock they were holding. They were holding large quantities of for their particular situations. That analogy is so useful for other aspects of life. You may be in a certain career field, and honestly, if most everything really ticks in your life, maybe there's some negatives, it's probably the best thing just to remain in that area until you have a very viable exit plan or something happens. And this is a key point here, that often, okay, if you get laid off because of the economy, this is a clear sign that it's probably a good time to segue into something else. This is a clear indicator. This was out of your control. Probably a great time to segue into something else or move or whatever. Whereas for a guy who's doing pretty well, who's really has everything in order, and then just thinks that they should leave, go to a different city or a different country or whatever, or change their career, probably isn't going to be the most practical. Only in certain situations would I advise someone to do this, and because your breakthroughs are all going to happen at different times in different areas, because location and timing is key. And this is important to realize that, okay, so a guy who in one place, their value could be very low, and at a particular time they go somewhere else and they could have very high value or perceived value. And that's just going to depend on each person, each guy obviously, and what they're about. But always note that if you feel like you're not high valued in one place, that doesn't mean it's going to be like that everywhere. Just like you may be very good value in your respective country, you go somewhere else and it may actually go down. This is something else to be aware of. You may actually have gotten a lot of respect. Even if you were itching to leave, go somewhere else, you may actually have been better off just staying where you were, and that there was already a high level of respect there. So the present situation that you're in, this may actually be very suitable. It's sometimes hard to understand if you haven't experienced something else. You don't have enough perspective to realize, oh, that was actually a great situation for me. And I also think that with the current state of affairs in the world with travel and restrictions, it's maybe better for a lot of people out there. And why they say this is because I remember, say 2-3 years ago, I'd planned a trip to Central Europe, and I went skiing. I had an awesome time. I was in Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Austria, and fantastic trip. I was skiing in northern Slovakia in the mountains there, Tetris Mountains. When I was planning this trip, it was really hard for me to make a plan, because at that time all these countries were open and I could basically travel anywhere. I had the money, I had the time, I had too many choices, honestly. And I was also looking at possibly going to Bulgaria or Serbia at that time. I also looked at Ukraine. These were other countries, but I had this small amount of time, about 2 weeks, to do this whole trip, a little over, and I had to be selective, but I had a lot of options. With the current state of affairs now, I think it would actually be a lot easier, because I would only have a handful of countries and places to go and things I could do. And it would be really easy to isolate, okay, I want to do this, because I only have this many options. In the same way, currently, for people, if they're looking at relocating, changing jobs, bank accounts, whatever they're doing, they may actually be more benefited having very limited options at that time, because then it's okay, I only have option A, B, and C. I don't have option 1 through 20, and it can actually make things more simple, and it's also easier to know, okay, that's the right way for me to go. When you have too many options, it's harder to know. Have a more difficult time at seeing clear indicators this is the right path for me. Whereas you have limited options, it makes life a lot easier. And I've also mentioned that in my previous employer, when I worked for UPS a few years ago, at that time I was still in university. I was 22 at the time when I'd started working for them. I applied for so many jobs, and that was the only like good solid opportunity company where I had to work, because it was it's challenging. Anyone who goes into the workplace knows this. To get like a full-time job nowadays is really hard, and I didn't really even have a lot of personal interest in UPS. They were giving me the best setup, best opportunities. I didn't have like any other opportunities apart from some temp jobs. And I knew, yeah, this was for me. This was the right path at that time with limited opportunities. And when I look back, I realized that that actually helped. Just like it probably is beneficial for guys right now with the current state of affairs. We don't have a lot of options, whether it's for travel, for work, in anything at the moment for most guys. And this really helps a lot, I think, in some ways. Always note that your path is your path. It's no one else's, and you got to stick to what's best for you. Give me your feedback below, and thank you.